I now declare the agenda briefing open at 6:01 Western Australian Standard Time. We would like to acknowledge the Whadjuk people, the traditional owners of this land. And jointly, we will pay our respect to the elders, past, present, and emerging. Mr. CEO.
Thank you, Mayor. Tonight's meeting is for the purpose of asking questions and seeking clarification on agenda items for the next ordinary council meeting. No decision making or entering into debate is to occur at this meeting. May I ask everyone present this evening to turn off all electronic devices, mobile phones, iPads and tablets for the duration of the briefing. Tonight's agenda briefing is being recorded. A copy of the audio recording shall be available on the City's website within 72 hours of the meeting. Agenda briefings are public meetings and any information you provide may be publicly accessible.
Thank you very much, Mr. CEO. Apologies, there's none this evening. Approved leave of absence. Leave of absence for this meeting was previously granted to Councillor Lindsay Holland. Disclosure of interest. Mr. CEO, to advise the disclosure received.
Thank you. I have received a declaration of impartiality from Councillor Kunza in relation to Notice of Motion 14-19 on page 77 of the agenda. Publication, the item details is publication of register, elected member payments, reimbursements, travel and review of policy CM 102.1. The nature of the association is, as an elected member, the proposed motion relates to a public register of payments that I may potentially receive. This is Councillor Kunzis writing this. As a consequence, there may be a perception that my impartiality on the matter may be affected. I declare that I will consider this matter on its merits and vote accordingly. However, tonight is not a decision-making forum. So it's a notification to all. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. CEO. Question time for public. Response to previous questions taken on notice. Response to previous questions taken on notice can be seen in tonight's agenda. Mr. CEO.
Thank you. The time set aside for public questions is 15 minutes, which may be extended if necessary. A question must relate to items listed on the agenda paper. For recording purposes, please state your name and address and then proceed to ask your question. If an answer cannot be provided at tonight's meeting, the question will be taken on notice and an answer will be provided at the next ordinary council meeting. In accordance with policy AD.02, members of the public who have registered their interest to ask questions with the City's administration shall be called upon in the order in which registrations were received. Written questions will precede verbal questions.
I now open the questioning time at 6:04 p.m. The City has received question for tonight's meeting from Miss Lois Murdoch. Mrs. Murdoch, can you come forward, please?
Thank you, Mayor. My name is Lois Murdoch of 355 Riverton Drive, Shelley. My question relates to the Shelley Rossmoyne Foreshore Management Plan 1, Note Action 1(1)F, to investigate the closure of two portions of road reserves at Whadjuk Point and Zenith Park to increase green space. While I am not necessarily opposed to the concept, I have a few concerns that are dependent on what is ultimately proposed. And given there hasn't been a concept plan provided, I would like to confirm that any changes would involve community consultation with local residents, i.e. the decision tonight does not lock in this action. The second part of my question relates to Whadjuk Point In the meantime of the above, is the council's intention to continue planting, further encroaching on what little lawn there is left? Thank you.
Director Bo.
Thank you, Mr Mayor, and thank you for the question, Mrs Murdoch. Just firstly, there will be no decision tonight. It's a briefing session. The decision on the draft Shelley Rossmoyne Foreshore Management Plan will be made next week at the Ordinary Council meeting. In response to your first question, the draft management plan does recommend investigating the closure of the road reserve that you referenced. This was proposed at one of the community workshops to increase the width of the foreshore area in order to provide space for shoreline protection and expand the significant habitat area, which while also increasing public open space for recreation. So we acknowledge that there were some objections to that proposal put forward, and also we've in the report tonight under paragraph 34, you will note that we have said that through further community consultation and engagement of local residents, we will investigate the potential closure of two portions of the road reserve at Wadjup Point and Zenith Park to increase green space. So in essence, the draft management plan won't progress that initiative until there's further community consultation undertaken. In regards to the second part of your question, the native vegetation at Wadjup Point is identified as a significant habitat area, and signage will be installed at significant habitat areas along the foreshore, and the native vegetation will be fenced with conservation style fencing, and dogs will be required to be on lead in that area. A small area of the revegetation works will be considered to buffer the native vegetation area for wildlife protection. Soil enrichment is proposed at Wadjup Point to improve the growth of the ground covers, including the grass. And a small band of revegetation is proposed behind the existing sedge bed. It's proposed to maintain a large section of grass for picnicking, and the community identified Wadjup Point as a picnicking location, and as a result we'll preserve that grass area there.
Are there any further questions from members of the gallery? Mrs. Aldrich.
Good evening, Mr Mayor, councillors, City of Canning officials and members of the public. My name is Marnie Aldridge and I live at Monota Avenue in Shelley. My first question is, if the Shelley Rossmoyne Foreshore Plan goes ahead, what's the timeline for the improvements? Is it possible that we can maybe link the timeline or have it, let's say, to wait until the master plans for that Shelley Beach area, so we know that they're compatible?
Director Bo.
Yes, thank you, Mr Mayor. It is possible, Mrs Aldridge, to wait, and certainly we wouldn't want to be progressing any of the initiatives under the Shelley Rossmoyne Foreshore Management Plan that would impinge on the ultimate design of Shelley Beach Park. Right. But you will note that the Shelley Beach Park area within the foreshore area was excluded from the consultation area, excluded from the consultation process. So that was just done on purpose to distinguish the two consultation processes. So in answer to your question, no, we won't be progressing the management plan initiatives that will impinge on the Shelley Beach Park area.
Okay, great. Okay, that's pretty much what my next question is. Attending those meetings at the community consultation sessions, we were told as you said, we couldn't discuss the Shelley Beach zone. So in good faith, we helped discuss and plan for the improvements. I think I've already mentioned this before, and I can understand that you're starting to be more aware of this issue. I'm really happy with the plans. I think it's great to see the environment as a emphasis on the environment, and we have these words like green corridor. But I'm a bit worried that we're going to have a big old door in the middle of it with a permanent building of a restaurant and a coffee shop. What steps will the City of Canning ensure that these two plans work well in conjunction?
Mr. Bo.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Well, they have been undertaken in conjunction with each other, and they must relate to each other under the terms of the management plan. The activities or redevelopment of the Shelley Beach Park must be in accordance with the objectives of the Shelley Rossmoyne Foreshore Management Plan. So that is up for council to endorse, but we as officers who've progressed those two projects believe that they have been done in concert.
Great. And Question 3, will there be an actual concept plan drawing of the area so that we can have something visual to see where benches are planned or trees will be planted, just like you did that fabulous plan with the Willerton basketball courts area, just so that we can have an idea of where the improvements will be placed? Is there any plans as such?
Director Ball?
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I might just ask Mrs Aldridge if you can clarify, you're referring to the Shelley Beach Park area?
No,
and
I'm
the
I'm actually referring to the Rossmoyne Shelley strip, the foreshore plan that we're discussing tonight.
Yeah, there are a number of the graphics in the management plan which depict some of the infrastructure improvements or some of the other improvements, but
Okay.
certainly I can talk with the staff and maybe we can develop something that's a bit more
That would be great.
coherent
Just so we
across
can
the
see,
entire
like, I
foreshore.
know with the Willerton basketball plans, they've got all the trees where the things are going to be planted, benches, that looked really visual. It was great to see. It'd just be nice to sort of see where they're on the plan. It'd be lovely. Thanks so much.
Thank you very much. Anyone else? Oh, Mr. Aldridge.
Good afternoon, Mayor, councillors and directors. With the northern boundary between the Shelley Beach Master Plan and the Rossmoyne through to Shelley Master Plan, I'm a bit confused as to where that boundary is. In the early workshop consultations, it was all the way around Beatrice Avenue was considered, and we were putting designs all the way through there, and then Zone C has got a different boundary to it, and then this plan has a different boundary again, and I'm wondering where the actual boundary on the northern end is between the two plans.
Director Ball?
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I'm happy to take that question on notice, Mr Aldridge, and provide you with some information that clarifies that.
Thank you. And also, I attended the community workshops, and during those discussions we talked about a lot of things, but I don't remember talking about a nature playground, and I just wanted to know where that idea came from in the Shelley Rossmoyne Riverfront plan.
Director?
Thanks, Mr Mayor. I'll take that on notice, Mr Aldridge, and also confirm
Yeah.
that for you.
Thank you. Just letting you know, I don't think it's a bad idea, was just curious where it came from. Okay, and also when you ask about that, if you can just make sure if that is to scale or not, because it's quite enormous on the plan, the size of the nature playground. I just don't know if that's at scale or whether it's just indicative of where it's roughly supposed to be.
Director Ball?
Yeah, I'm happy to do that, Mr Mayor. Thanks.
Thank you very much for your time.
Anyone else? Oh, all right. I now close the questioning time at 6:14 p.m. Deputation, there's none this evening.
Sorry, I forgot to also request, could we have that brought forward if it's possible? The whole Shelley Rossmoyne master plan, because there's a fair few people in the audience.
No, you just need to proceed.
Okay. We now move on. Items brought forward for the convenience of those in the public gallery. There's none. Reports of committee meetings. There's none. There's no report from the CEO this evening.
Mr. Mayor, can I ask a question? I think Mr Aldridge asked a question. Has it been, we have got members of the public here who are here for that one item. Can we please bring it forward? Is that possible?
Can you please repeat your comment, Councillor Patrick Hall?
Thank you, Mr Mayor. The item that Mr Aldridge referred to, he asked simply if we could bring it forward. There are a number of people in the gallery, including the Murdochs, who asked some questions and have come in tonight specifically for that item, and unless there's good reason not to, is there a possibility we may be able to bring that forward, please?
No, because tonight the agenda is not very long. We will just continue as it is. We now move to CC 041-19, monthly financial report, July 2019. The recommendation is on page 5. It's on the screen now. Is there any question? Councillor Barry.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. On page 3 of attachment 1, there's a sum for a new debentures of $1.15 million. I'm just wondering whether, if that is the same 1.150 that was for in the warrant listings for the Willetton Basketball Association. You can take these on notice if you want. I mean,
Dr. Adam.
I'll take that on notice.
yeah, and further to that, just is a part of the original 2.2. On the next page, it's page 12 of my one. In the reserve fund details, the Bentley Regen has got a sum of $3.6 million. The question I ask is that I think the other night when we were talking about another project in Bentley, it was said that it was 5.9. That's no longer there. I'm not quite sure whether it went to Sill Park or Hillview. If you could possibly clarify that for me. And in the warrant listings on page 2, 10037 printed publications and newspapers, $28,000. I'd just like to, just for clarification, what they're for. On page 5, Civica, I think it's 10399. It's software licensing and support. It's for $202,000. And just in recent times, we've had the digital strategy, and I thought we were using Technology One. I was just wondering, how, besides Tech One, how many other licensing arrangements do we have for software and maintenance within the city? 10043 Beaver Tree, $377,000. I just need to know whether that's just an upfront payment for the year or how we manage that sum of money to be owed to them. 10543 Garage Sale Trail Foundation, the membership of $8,500, and I'm just wondering what do we get for that. And 11314, there's $42,000 for a Melville Subaru. I'm not quite sure whether whether it's part of an employee contract or not. Just if you could clarify that for me. And the last question is, in the warrant listings under the Willetton Basketball, Canning Men's Shed, $23,375. I'm just wondering whether that's for is that a prepayment for the first 12 months of their new lease paid by the city? Thank you.
Director.
In response to the last one, yes, that was a prepayment made on behalf of Canning Men's Shed, subsequent to the council decision to support that group to pay their lease. With regard to the other questions, I will take them on notice and provide a full response to all elected members.
Any other questions? All right. We now move on. We now move to CC 042-19, budget review as at 31st August 2019. Any question? Councillor Barry.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yes, carry forward. Now, just on page 26, and I don't know whether you've got that rundown of the draft carry forwards. Yep. If we go down to comm messaging LED, Rivet Leisureplex expenses, it's 126,000 adopted, revised, and then actual 3728. I don't know whether it's a typo, but it's only carried forward 12,844. Can you explain that, please?
Director. Can you please repeat the page?
So,
Take it on
sorry.
notice if you wish.
On my sheet, it shows that, are you referring to comm messaging LED signboards?
No, the one underneath, sorry. You've got 126, actual 3,000.
Okay,
And
so
then 12.
that's the lease payments for the equipment, the new equipment at Riverton Leisureplex. They're put into last year's budget. We didn't end up receiving that equipment until close to the end of the financial year, so there would have only been a small proportion of that spent. Obviously, now that the equipment's in place, we need to carry forward the funding to pay for that leased equipment.
So it doesn't, you don't have to put in the carry forward of the 100 and whatever it is, 123? Why is it
Sorry,
saying?
I would assume that we have already rebudgeted for that in this financial year. So,
Okay.
because it's an ongoing lease, yeah.
And down further, third up from the bottom, Project 8, Bentley John Street, Capital Works, is that the block on the corner?
Director.
Yes, so that was to fund the demolition works,
All right.
which were carried out. There was some money left over. There's still, the prospect that we may have to do a little bit of tidying up on that block of land, so that money's been left in there to do that.
And on the next page, we go, I mean, these are just ones that popped out at me. Gerard Street, Bridge, Gerard Street, Luya, 321,000, and there's no actuals, but we're only carrying forward 200,000. So is there a reason why we're shy of the 121,000?
Director Bo.
Yeah, we just revised the scope to that, Councillor Barry, and as a result, we realised some savings on the original budgeted project. We're yet to start that project, but that's the reason.
So once again, I mean, the question I ask is, I mean, when we add up these carry forwards, they come to 20 odd million. Now, I mean, I know that we talk about the fact that some of them are 2 and 3 year projects. A lot of them are not, with nominal amounts or minimal amounts spent. Now, I'm just wondering, because as I hear it, the money goes back into reserves. Does it come out and these projects are done again, even though the timing was out initially?
Director.
So you'll note on page 24, under paragraph 25, it shows the breakdown of what's been carried over in total for the capital program. So the carryover capital program is 10,896,000, of which 7.7 million was coming out of reserves. So the net amount carried forward in terms of funding for capital is 3.1 million. If you look on the breakdown of all of the carry forwards, there is a funding source. So where it has a funding source, LBR is land and building reserve. There's an infrastructure reserve, city centre reserve. So you'll note that there's a significant amount that was scheduled to come out of the infrastructure reserve. That money sits in the reserve until the expenditure is required, and then it comes out. So,
Project, but,
yes.
okay, thank you.
Is there any other question? No. Now we move on to, yes, we will now move to EN 022-19, Sherry Rossmoyne Foreshore Management Plan. The recommendation is on, yes, yeah, for the benefit of Mr. and Mrs. Murdoch. On page 63, it's on the screen now. We are talking about EN 022-19 Shelley Rossmoyne Foreshore Management Plan. Any question? Councillor Barry.
Yes, Mr. Mayor, it's really a query come question, and it's probably in relation to what Mrs. Murdoch was saying. I think 38 or 3940. I mean, it was in relation to that road reserve that they were a bit worried about, and I think the city said that they would do some 34, 39. They would do some consultation, and I'm just wondering, before anything's done and after that consultation, is it appropriate, or is it going to be that it would come back to the elected members for consideration as to whether council wishes that or not? Thank you.
Director Bone.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm happy for the results of the consultation to be presented or referred to the elected members for their consideration, Councillor Barry. Certainly, the draft management plan has been amended to ensure that there is further consultation undertaken before we implement the potential road closure, so I'm happy to socialise that with the elected members.
Any other question? Councillor Kunza.
Just to confirm on that, that might not happen for a number of years, and so would that, it would normally be the case that modifications to a road network would come before council anyway, wouldn't it?
Director.
I would be, it would be my intention to brief the elected members, and certainly if any modification to the reservation or the management order of the land is required, that certainly does need to come through council. So yes, Councillor Kunza.
Councillor Kunza.
Just to further elaborate, I'm very cognizant that who knows, in 4 years' time, certain people might not be around, and when actions of council are taken as for the word, as they're written in a resolution or what, I just want to make sure that before any changes would be made, that there'd be something that stipulated that it had to come before council, and it didn't just suddenly become part of a budget and start making modifications, and if certain staff weren't here at that time and it wasn't put before council.
Director.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. If the elected members are agreeable, I can circulate some potential wording about getting a greater level of surety for the elected members that that will come back after the consultation process. I can do that after the meeting or later this week.
Councillor Kunza.
With Action Plan 3.3b, just given the I'll wait if you want to find the action point. Just parts of this management plan has gone into quite significant detail as to what's being proposed, and I just found it a bit funny that the audit of the facilities along the Rossmoyne Shelley foreshore for disability compliance wasn't actually taken into account in this process. Why are we looking at it subsequent? It's basically a plan for a plan. Why was it not the facilities looked at now for disability compliance as part of this, given that it's been quite a specific and long-ranging investigation as to the foreshore?
Director.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm happy to take that question on notice, Councillor, because I don't know the answer. I'll speak with the relevant staff and get back to you.
Continue, Councillor Kunza.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. With the business plan and the additional costs that would be needed, my interpretation was a lot of that was the capital costs. What would be the difference in recurrent expenditure going forward if we implement this? Some of it has been noted that it will be taken into the operational budget, but I was just wondering what the long-term operational nature would be.
Director. Director.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. I'll just have to take that one on notice as well.
Councillor Kunza.
If there's no one else, I'll just keep going. In regard to the prospect of a Wajak Noongar Ranger, Is that not something that should be, I recognise the comment in point 22, but should that not have been something as part of a reconciliation plan or a wider holistic plan? Why is it being looked at in this isolated plan here?
Director.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I'll ask our Senior Landscape Conservation Officer, Ms Andrews, to respond to that question.
During the community consultation process, or sorry, pre that, we met with traditional owners of the Whadjuk Noongar area, and one of their special requests was that we engage a Noongar ranger on the foreshore. In the Reconciliation Action Plan, it refers to the city having employment strategy for Aboriginal people, but doesn't specifically state a Noongar ranger.
And is that estimated $100,000 cost all in the cost of the employee, or is it for other things as part of that?
Yes, continue.
That includes the cost of the employee plus the overheads.
Any other question? All right, we move on. We now move backward, not forward. We now move backward to SD 013-19. Application for development approval, mixed development at 129 Wharf Street, number 123, lot 123 at Kennington. It's on page 34, it's on the screen. Any question? Councillor Sabiri.
My question is in regards to the period of 4 years from the date of determination. I was wondering why we're giving 4 years. Is it correct that under the planning scheme it's something like 2 years originally, and why are we not following that? And how does it benefit our ratepayers to do this?
Director Bright.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Given these developments are a fair bit larger than your normal residential type developments, a period of 4 years is considered a reasonable time frame in which to allow these larger developments to get all their information in order to accommodate. There's a lot of steps involved in getting a development like this to a building permit stage and then obviously a construction stage. So we've given a little bit more time for these larger developments throughout the city. It's a common condition we've put on.
Councillor Barry.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. That's a question to Director Bride. It used to be 2 years for a development application. Is for the new norm in relation to the question of Councillor Sabiri?
Director Bright.
Yeah, through Mr Mayor, the 2 years is a standard, but it's not uncommon, and Council has the ability and has applied longer periods of time. The JDAP especially has applied a condition that builds in a bit more flexibility. So certainly 2 would be what you'd expect for a smaller development, but there's you know, a 4 year period is quite reasonable given the scale and type of this development.
So just another question. This goes back to a previous time as well. Is there, if the city agrees to this, and within the 4 year time frame, the current landowner decides to sell it, does all that go with the new owner?
Director.
Yeah, through Mr Mayor, the development runs with the land, so this particular development would have a life then of 4 years. So if it was sold to someone else, if they wanted to build the exact same development, then that 4 year period would apply. If they want to do a brand new development, it doesn't relate to this one. It's a whole new ball game. You start from scratch.
And so I assume whatever part of the 4 years is gone, if there's 2 years left, you can't go 4 again.
Yes, that's correct. So from the date of issue, it's 4 years. So they've got 4 years in which to get everything in order to then start construction. It has to be substantially commenced within that 4 year period.
The other question, I mean, it's a little bit like the one we had the other week with the childcare, the number of conditions that we've put on, and I don't doubt they're needed, but when we go to the attachment 6, there's so much orange there, which basically says pending further attention. Is that going to happen within the 4 years, or are we saying even with all that orange and only one green, as it is, that's fine with the City of Canning?
Director.
Yeah, yes, 3 minutes to me. Yes, the conditions that we've put on, we feel are definitely relevant to this particular approval. As per paragraph 14, we've gone through all the outstanding items out of the design review panel have been encapsulated in that table, and we think most of those issues can be resolved through conditions. Some of them we believe, whilst they may add some additional value, are not significant enough to warrant a complete change in the design. But certainly we've gone through each of those outstanding matters in the paragraph 14. So I'm happy to take questions on any of those that you have.
Just from the point of view, does it seem the developer is happy to comply with the recommendations as such, the orange ones?
Director.
Through Mr. Mayor, I think it's important to note that I think this development's gone through about 3 separate design review panel meetings, and there's been a range of recommendations all the way through, and there has been design improvements from the first meeting to where we're at the moment, and to the point now where the remaining issues primarily relate to the fact that it's adjacent to a drain. The panel felt that the development, where possible, should address the drain more, because eventually that will become a living stream and have a lot more amenity. The reality is that that particular drain's not in our regeneration program schedule of works. It's likely to be a very long time before that drain has a level of amenity that you could open up, for example, a cafe onto. So those were the issues where the panel felt that some of the aspects could be improved. It was more focused towards that drain, given it will in the future be a living stream, but given the length of time before that can actually happen, in the interim, you don't want a flow out area of your cafe facing a deep drainage panel. Yeah.
Is there any other question? All right, we move on. We now move to EN0. We now move to EN021-19, Buranda Park Ancillary Works, BPAW, Landscape Master Plan. It's on page 53. It's now on the screen. Any question? Councillor Barry.
Yeah, just if, and similar to the Rossmoyne Foreshore one, number 2, it says supports further investigation of the Willetton Sports Precinct concept, and given the fact that it's a, as you say, well, it's not actually, well, it is a landscape master plan, but I mean, can some words be put in there to sort of be the same as what we had with the Shelley Foreshore, that it comes back to council prior to any decision in relation to number 2? I mean, because that's a pretty broad statement, and there's nothing there that says anything except we support further investigation. Well, on what?
Director.
Yes, that can be easily accommodated, Councillor Barry. The intent of the recommendation was just to elicit support from council to progress, some further investigations about what can happen to the northern precinct of Buranda.
Yeah.
But I can certainly look at some wording that would give some clarity and certainty that anything would be returned back to council for endorsement.
Thank you.
Councillor Kunza.
Through you, Mr. Mayor. Point 23 outlines that the new plan has provision of 410 car parking bays, and that the DA for the Willetton Basketball Association stadium expansion only needed 335. But with the Realm report on page 17, it says that the existing is 310, post-expansion is 283, and the proposed will lift that to 337. Why is there a disparity there? Have I misread something?
Director.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. No, you haven't misread it, Councillor Kunza. The overall number of parking bays is going to be 410. When the Realm report was written, that was quite a number of months prior, and it was written at the time that the SIB was undertaken on the master plan. Since that time, there's been further works and further investigations done, because the feedback that we received from WBA was that they remained concerned about the parking. Our staff went on site, including over the weekends at the highest usage times, and we've also incorporated some potential formalisation of parking in that 410 number around the northern end of Burrendar Oval. So there are some other parking opportunities that we've identified subsequent to the SIB briefing to try and address some of the concerns that we received at that time and subsequent to further engagement with the stakeholders.
Councillor Kunza.
Just if the DA, they require 335 bays, but it's our land and we're modifying it, whose responsibility is it if the parking isn't adequate in the future? I imagine it's ours.
Director.
Yes, that's my understanding, Councillor Kunza. The WBA are required under the DA to provide parking as determined by the DA. We, when looking at a broader precinct approach, would identify and then be responsible for any additional parking over and above that to meet the parking demand.
Councillor.
And just following on, I get the desire to increase the level of tree canopy cover, and big supporter of that, but the notion of replacing every 6th parking bay with trees when parking is at a premium, is that not a questionable decision?
Director.
All decisions are questionable, Councillor Kunza. Our aim is to deliver the strategic objectives of a number of those plans that were considered in reviewing this master plan, and we believe that through the further investigation subsequent to the strategic issues briefing, that relinquishing 1 in 6 bays for a tree in that location can be offset through identifying other parking options in the future, and certainly to the north of the precinct at that time.
Councillor Kunza.
Sorry, just one more and then I'll let it go. But with those trees around the precinct of the Bulletin Bowling Club, my understanding is they're limited in how they can take leaf litter and so forth off their synthetic turf, and that they might, putting trees around there might then cause problems going forward in maintaining their synthetic turf. Have they been engaged through this process?
Director.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I don't believe they've been engaged to the degree of tree selection or the like, Councillor Kunza, but certainly we would engage before we undertook the commencement of delivering the landscape master plan, and we'd need to take into consideration those operational requirements of the bowling club at the time. So I'll ensure that the staff are aware of those concerns and we can handle them as we progress the master plan.
Councillor Panature.
Mr. Mayor, if we haven't, or if we're not going to give them adequate car park, can we actually increase the number of bike racks? Because given that the roads are going to be all modified and it's all going to be new, how do we encourage more youth to cycle and get to the basketball stadium? I mean, I do understand in the weekend, just the overlapping time is like between pick up and drop is the time the number of cars moving within the basketball stadium. So should we actually look at putting more bike racks? Would that help? Thank you.
Director.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. That is a very good question, Councillor Punithroi, and we have considered our integrated transport strategy, and we do believe that we've accommodated those objectives in the master plan through promoting alternative modes of transport to what will be this activity centre and this precinct that's the sporting precinct. So we've increased the number of bike racks and we'll be also, as intimated in the report, the Burrendar Boulevard upgrade will also try and promote an environment that's less dominated by vehicles to make it, I guess, more pedestrian and bike friendly in and around the precinct, but we can give you some actual details. I don't have the numbers on bike rack facilities in the master plan as it stands.
Councillor Kunza.
Just the last question on this one. Point 21 talks about pop-up events. Given that when private entities want to get a hawker's license, they're unable to put up, get a hawker's license, I think, within 500 metres of a competing business, how would we enable pop-up events there, given that it's across the road from eateries, cafes and all sorts?
Director. Mr. Bright.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'll take that on notice and just check in on what the implications are for the licensing of those pop-up events. Thank you.
All right, we move on. We now move to EN 023-19. Proposed new policy RS.01, construction within the road reserve. Recommendation is on page 77. It's on the screen. I call on the Manager of Transport and Sustainability Engineering to come forward and provide a presentation on the proposed new policy.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor and councillors. My name is Ben Moore. I'm the City's Manager of Transport and Sustainability Engineering. This evening I'll give you a brief overview of two agenda items, EN 023-19 relating to construction within the road reserve, and item EN 024-19 relating to road reserve management. The nature of this review is what we would consider to be a major review. It's been some 10 years since a review of this nature has been undertaken for the city's engineering policies, and as such a number of factors have needed to be taken into consideration as part of the review. Those factors I'll elaborate on shortly. The first item, as you'll see on screen, relates to policy reviews conducted for matters which relate to construction activities which may occur within the road reserve. At present, the City have 12 adopted policies relating to this particular matter. The City proposes that these 12 items are better handled via a singular policy referred to as construction within the road reserve. See if this works. That does it. Yeah. Second item relates to policy reviews conducted for matters to do with management of functions to do with the road reserve and road reserve assets. At present, we have 7 policies, adopted policies relating to this particular matter. The City proposed that these 7 items are again better handled with a singular policy referred to as road reserve management. Some of the principles which have been placed into this review, as I mentioned, we've considered it to be a fairly major review, so we've really looked back through all of the things that you will have been familiar with over the past few years, the amendment to the City's vision and values. There's been a number of legislative changes over the past 10-year period. The City's strategy has also changed, changes to, I guess, overall responsibility in the context of the previous policies and the structure of the organisation. With regards to the alignment to the City's vision and values, I think the fundamental principle that we've adopted in moving through this is that we place our customers at the heart of our decisions around the assets that we maintain on their behalf. We should be easy to do business with. We should have a consistent approach. We should produce legible documents consistent with our other neighbouring local government authorities that are progressive and current. Really a policy for now with an eye to the future. The previous policy documents reflected a different time for Canning, where infrastructure delivery was in a different setting than it is today. i.e. a greenfield environment with large subdivisional development as opposed to our current infill development, or alternatively an older infrastructure base compared to what was a newer infrastructure base at the time. This policy review looks to adopt best practice principles for management of assets or the creation of new assets. Alignment to legislation. So this one here, actually the slide probably doesn't quite do it justice. I've been asked to tone this down by Director Bowe, but I have done a total of the number of sections of legislation and laws which are applicable to the road reserve management policies and construction policies. In total, I counted 88 subsections of acts, legislations of laws, both at federal and state level, which directly relate to these policies. So they are fairly extensively reviewed, and obviously that is specific reference. They are heavily influenced by each of the acts and regs that you see on the screen. As you'll no doubt appreciate, changes over a 10-year period, we were probably considerably out of date with a number of the regulations and pieces of legislation that we have to work within over that period of time. Alignment to strategy. So we've actually gone through and made sure that the positioning of these policies into the future really does align with our strategy with regards to connecting. Much of our recreating is done within our managed road reserves. They're places for people and must be maintained and built properly to ensure a safe and healthy community. The change in style of these policies also improves the legibility of the content, making them more accessible for all. With regards to grow, the road reserves are a place where much of the city's urban canopy growth must come from. As you will no doubt be aware, the city are very active in the space of recycling materials in our road construction practices. Also that efficient road networks provide us the opportunities to reduce our dependence on fossil fuels. Our drainage systems within these road networks are also required to be responsibly managed to prevent damage to people, properties and the environment. From a build perspective, for safe, well-designed and maintained roads, integrated and safe transport alternatives and beautiful and green urban spaces directly relate to these policies also. Prospering infrastructure and planning environments which enable diversification, a business-friendly environment, reducing red tape and making us easy to do business with. A revitalised city centre and also some of our industrial areas you could see would quite clearly align with these policy positions. With regards to leadership, effective leadership and good governance which requires compliance with legal requirements. My earlier comments regarding legislative alignment speaks directly to this. Policy documents must allow elected members and staff to practice high ethical standards, as well as being open and transparent to the community. The practices which follow through with these policy statements speak clearly to the way in which we will handle this function. They must represent, these policies must represent the broader community of Canning in all decision making. Policies should provide opportunities for innovation, flexibility and resilience. They should position the city to meet future needs, provide opportunities for collaborative relationships with our stakeholders. I believe these policies demonstrate leadership by providing ongoing improvement, good governance framework and processes. I'll try and wrap this up shortly if I can. Changes to responsibility and structure. These policies will be primarily implemented by the Canning Environment Program area. Changes to operational procedures which fall from these will be handled directly by the Canning Environment area also under Director Bowe or the CEO or the delegated representative. Many of the policies proposed to be superseded, and you'll see it may be a bit of a struggle, but perhaps on your screen there is a highlighted item there in yellow which says administrative. So many of these policies were of an administrative nature. one of the overriding objectives of this was to remove operational detail from these policies and really allow elected members to focus on setting the high-level objectives, whilst then providing a procedural manual to allow the administration to deliver on those objectives. And that's essentially it. Thank you.
Councillor Patrick Ong.
Thank you. Thanks for the presentation. The consolidation of policy is always a good thing. I just wanted to make a comment. I do take the point in relation to, and I'm talking about item EN 02419, the road reserve management, and I did take the point in relation to making these a much more high-level policy document and not referencing certain things that might make them like legislation that's no longer aligned to the policy. I just wondered whether we should be actually having in the definition section towards zero, which is actually a document that only runs at the moment to 2020 and almost makes the policy immediately redundant, well not redundant, but it dates the policy, and it just seems peculiar in a high-level policy document to actually name a stake-up strategy that has a shelf life of only months.
Director.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'll ask Mr. Moore to answer that question, if he can.
It is certainly something that we are aware of. The consultation period for the Imagine Zero paper, which is now out, which is the predicted road safety strategy which will go forward, will take some time to actually come into place. As with the comments regarding the last review period before these policy reviewers come up again, I would envisage these would be reviewed at a more frequent interval. As such, the change in state road strategy would take effect in the next review period. Something we are fully aware of that is going to change, likewise with a number of other strategies that are referred to through those documents and pieces of legislation.
Councillor Patrick Ong.
My only other pedantic comment would be, for goodness sakes, Ben, we've got to save a word out of the definition of city to bring that 1995 up to the first page. I don't know how we're going to do that. That's it. Thank you.
Mr. Moore. Okay. Anyone else? Councillor Sabiri.
Thank you for the presentation. I was wondering about, I couldn't find it within the document. It might be referenced, but my question is about existing neighborhoods and footpaths, I guess. And say we used to have 900 square meter houses. Now they're subdividable to 3. There's sort of no footpath at all on either side of the street. What will happen within the new policy? Are we considering having a footpath or like a cycle path, anything similar? Because it might be referenced, I'm not sure yet. Thanks.
Mr. Moore.
So the previous policy position, or the previous policy related to the placement width of footpaths, things of that nature, this one here will now take place to basically set an overarching strategy or overarching policy position for footpaths, with the city cycling and walking plan taking the ultimate direction on the implementation of that path network. I think that might answer the question.
No, I understand, and I've read those plans, but when I read those plans, it really refers to new subdivisions. It doesn't really address existing neighborhoods.
Mr. Moore.
I think probably best I take that question on notice. I might need to dive into that with a bit more detail because it likely comes up under a number of other subsections as well. You'll note items such as road transport safety will also then begin to consider things like pedestrian safety and the overall movement network. It's probably referenced in a number of other areas, so I'll provide you a comprehensive answer after the meeting.
All right, thank you very much.
Councillor Barry.
Yes, I think Mr. Moore said the collaboration with the neighbouring local governments. Are we leading this, or have South Perth, Gosnells and all that already got into this? Similar?
Mr. Moore. Director Ball.
Oh, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Councillor Barry, is your question in relation to the collaboration we undertook in reviewing the policies, or in relation to the content and how that applies to other councils?
Don't talk to yourself.
I won't. Has the city done collaborative talks with South Perth or Gosnells or the likes, or Vic Park, or have they already got this in train?
Director.
My understanding is that through our normal channels, Councillor Barry, we would be engaging with our equivalents across local government boundaries. I imagine that there are a number of elements of these policies that are borrowed, for want of a better description, from other local governments. Certainly literature review that we did in developing them took into consideration a number of other policies held by other local governments. So I think the answer to your question is yes, we have in effect looked over the fence, considered what other local governments have had, and I'd ultimately, chosen the bits that we want to have reflected in our council policies. Mindful that it's probably not taken our other colleagues over 10 years to undertake a full review of the suite of policies that govern our activities in the road reserves.
So are we first cab off the rank?
Director.
I'm not sure how to answer that, Mr. Mayor, to be honest, but I do believe we have a contemporary policy that brings us into the 21st century and will be easily administered, and also give us this flexibility through the management procedure or the operational procedures to improve the benefits for our ratepayers and residents. So I'm not sure we're first off the bat though.
Just another question in relation to the governance with all those different acts. They, even though it's our policy, they would still always be king if there was conflict?
Director.
Yes, that's correct, Councillor Barry, and my understanding was that what we needed to do was to ensure, and what we did do with the reviews, to ensure that we weren't referencing anything in our subsequent and revised policy that was already covered or inconsistent or ultra vires with any of the acts. And you'll see on pages, I've got page 5, but under paragraphs 36 and in the relevant reports, the subsections and clauses that were removed or reviewed and ultimately considered to not be relevant, and we would, we transferred those obligations into the policy. But in short, the Act will always override a policy, and our objective was to ensure that we weren't inconsistent.
The RSO2, the road safety, it says the city is committed to the Towards Zero road safety strategy. I'm just wondering whether we should put a hyphen or a comma in there somewhere, because it sounds like Towards Zero road safety. Point taken. Thank you.
Director.
Thanks for the advice, Councillor Barry. We'll put that in. Thanks.
All right, we move on. We now move to EN 024-19, proposed new policy, RS02, road reserve management. It's on page 89, it's on the screen. Any question? All right, we move on. Late item, Telstra advertising proposal for smart city payphone. It's on page 1 of the circulated late items. Any question? Oh.
Only to say
Councillor Barry.
Only to say that I haven't had an opportunity to read it. Thanks, Mr. Mayor.
Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I've had a moment to briefly scan through. I just wondered if there was any pictures of what those new payphones look like, and whether they've been, that's the part I didn't see. Yeah, could you just pinpoint where that is, please? Because I was reading it, it makes sense, but I figure a picture it might be something that's similar to in other areas, not just here in Canning, that I might have come across before.
Yeah, thank you,
Director.
Madam Deputy Mayor. I think if you continue to the last page of the actual report, the attachments are after those nice colour photos.
Any question? All right, we move on. We now move to the motion of which previous notice has been given. A notice of motion has been received from Councillor Patrick Hall, which can be seen on the screen. Are there any questions? Is NOM-014-19 publication of register, elected members' payments, reimbursement, travel, and review of policy, CM102-1. Any question? Councillor Berry.
Just a question through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Hall. I note in the June one, which was similar, number 2.2, where it says request the Chief Executive Officer consider publishing for the employees. I'm just wondering whether Councillor Hall would like to say why that was deleted from this one. Thank you.
Councillor Hall.
I had a discussion with the CEO, and the CEO asked if I would consider removing it. I didn't think it was material to what I wanted to do. I understand from my point of view, it is a matter for the CEO. He employs his staff. I expect him to deal with that to the best of his ability, and I don't expect to be looking over his shoulder. Those are questions I guess we can ask under notice, but I was happy to remove it. I wasn't happy about removing something else, but I'll talk about that in a moment. But that was the reason.
Councillor Patrick Hall.
Yeah, Mr. Mayor, all of the entitlements and expenses that councillors are claiming are obviously done illegally, lawfully. There is no issue with anything that's being claimed. Several weeks ago, a table was produced of councillor expenses, including my own, and distributed to all elected members and to the executive committee. I had included a table or an extract of that table or my own table, and I'm informed that it was your decision to actually remove that table from this report, which means it has lost all context. And I'm wondering why you decided to remove that from this report.
My reason for removing it is because the table is not well researched. It was for internal consumption. It was not supposed to be for the public. So that was the reason why it was removed, and I stand by it. This evening forum is question only. I do not expect people to make any more statement other than asking question. Any question? Councillor Patrick Hall.
I did just ask a question with respect, Mr. Mayor. Just based on exactly what you just said, your response just then, if it's not for the public consumption, that table was produced to and again distributed to all members of this council today, and has been now fully researched and is accurate, and has been distributed in full to a member of the public on request. So since it's now in the public domain and has been, I guess, published or distributed to a member of the public, and I note that she wasn't asked to keep that confidential, so I'm wondering, will you now be looking to actually put that revised, accurate representation of councillor expenses and reimbursements back into the agenda now that it has obviously gone through due diligence?
Well, it can be considered. We will look at it again.
I think we can be more definitive. We will include it in the notice of motion.
All right, we will include it in the notice of motion. Any other question? Councillor Jacobs.
Mr. Mayor, has it been 3 months since this one's come to council?
Mr. Adam.
No, it has not. There is no requirement to wait 3 months to bring a matter back before council. This motion was lost. There was no alternative motion put forward. The only time when a notice of motion has to wait 3 months to be resubmitted is if it lapses, which is when there is no seconder. So there may be a mover, no seconder. Our standing orders then say that it needs to wait 3 months before it comes back to council.
Any question? Councillor Kunza.
In regard to the disparity between the two tables or the information provided, I wasn't aware of that until I saw today's information provided to a resident. Why was I not informed that there was inconsistencies with the information provided? For 2 months ago.
CEO.
That was a conversation between the councillor who proposed the notice of motion and myself initially, and then subsequently with me and the mayor. I didn't think it was an issue that was needed to be broadcast. It was a notice of, it was attached to a notice of motion, and I discussed that with the relevant councillor. So I think that's what you're referring to, councillor. The conversation with the councillor and Councillor Patrick Hall, I hope you don't mind me trying to remember the conversation, was that we did not believe that the table that was provided to you, which was an answer to a specific series of questions, was suitable to accompany Councillor Patrick Hall's notice of motion because it dealt with other questions other than what was proposed by Councillor Patrick Hall. We felt it was incomplete in that it was not addressing the breadth of the items that were raised in Councillor Patrick Hall's notice of motion. So on that basis, I had advised the Mayor that I did not believe it should be included. The Mayor agreed with my conclusion, and although Councillor Patrick Hall asked me to review that, I did, and I spoke with the Mayor, and the original decisions stood.
Councillor Kunza.
It wasn't in relation to the notice of motion. It was more to do with the information provided. For example, 2 months ago, the Australian Institute of Companies Directors course appeared to cost $7,235, and now it seems to cost $7,335. If it was updated, why wasn't it clarified?
CEO.
Sorry, I thought we had clarified what the extra cost to the company's directors course was due to. Donna Ross, my executive officer, was seeking the payments from the elected members for the extra amount of money that was associated with the company directors course. So I think we've attended to that or are attending to that. If the records show that the money has not been paid yet, it doesn't mean it hasn't been pursued. It's just a timing matter. So I think that's the only response I can give to that. Nothing more I can add.
No, just to clarify, 2 months ago, the information, it was $7,235, and then this table now says that it's $7,335.
Director Adam? Yeah, he's checking the box.
I'll just make a comment. When Councillor Kunza first asked the question, it was the day of a council meeting. It was prepared probably about an hour before a council meeting in response to a specific question. That doesn't give us a significant amount of time to go through and fully audit and make sure that all of that information has gone through what we'd normally say is our quality assurance process. In responding to the question that has since been put to us, we have ensured that we've gone through and collected all of the relevant information that responds to the questions in detail. They've been through a quality assurance process, and therefore we're confident in the figures. If you look back over time, the price of the company directors course has changed over time. I think when Councillor Tarrant first did it, it was $6,995, something in that order. So over time, the price has changed. So now that we've gone back and done the appropriate checks and balances, the appropriate amounts are in there. So all I can say is that, you know, when we were originally asked the question, we gave the information that we had on hand, knowing that it was for a specific question, not going out into the general public and being scrutinised to the extent that this information will be. So this information has now been properly compiled and checked, and therefore there's confidence that it can be out there in the public domain.
Councillor Kunza.
I just want to say I appreciate that I asked that question on the day, given that the notice of motion, I didn't see it till the agenda came up, and I recognise that that was the information at hand. I guess my point is I'm only now learning that it was wrong 2 months later after another resident asked.
Director.
So this is in response to a different question, and it goes to total training. So the other thing is that this information was finalised and sent out today. So if there are any differences between what you were given on that particular day and now, they only just become apparent because this was compiled and fully ticked off last night and sent out this morning.
Councillor Jacobs.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. I thought it'd be good to ask questions today rather than next week. I'm a bit, would like a little bit extra clarification as to why admin expenses are going to be out and the reasons, and if there's any precedent in other local government jurisdictions to do that sort of thing. Thank you.
Director.
Councillor Jacobs, could I just seek some further clarification on what you...
Yeah, so earlier Councillor Patrick Hall said that the first question was from Councillor Barry. He said that he noticed that it was a bit different from the last one because there was I think it was 2.2? 0.2 of 2, and it was originally going to be, so councillors were going to disclose their figures and admin was going to disclose their figures. My understanding is that the CEO and Councillor Patrick Hall had a discussion and he agreed to take the second component out. I just wanted to understand the logic of that and if there's any precedent in, I know that Maryville has recently passed something similar. Thank you.
CEO.
Councillor Jacobs, it's Councillor Patrick Hall's notice of motion. So if Councillor Patrick Hall wants to put a notice of motion forward or wishes to change it following a discussion with myself, then ultimately it'll be his call. Just as every one of the elected members around this table has consulted with administration around the formulation of their notices of motion from time to time, more often than not. So it's a normal thing to happen, and if a councillor chooses not to include it, then it's a councillor's call.
Councillor Patrick Hall.
Happy to clarify that, Jesse, just from the point of view that it was just normal, what we all do. The motion was submitted in draft, and as I always do, I asked for comments and feedback from the officers, and that was when the conversation occurred. So it wasn't material to what I really wanted was to have the allowances and expenses actually registered. It had been an afterthought in the first one in any case, and this is not a genius idea of mine. I picked it up from the City of Melville, who have adopted something almost exactly the same. So it wasn't material, and I was happy to remove it whilst it was still in draft and before it was published. So there was no skullduggery involved. It was just I'd asked for comments from the City and the CNI. I had a discussion, that was it.
Councillor Ponnaturra.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Under the governance process, this question may be to, through Mr. Mayor to the Director Adams. So, for example, if any councillors have an allowance for, say, clothing is 500, training is 3,000, and interstate is another 3,000. So there is a particular limit. There is a number there, of course. So when we put that through, we cannot claim anything more than that particular number. So, for example, if that internal training is $7,000 over 2 years, and so if that exceeds, obviously you might want to discuss and let us know that. That's kind of a preventive controls in place. I'm just clarifying. So we definitely have preventive controls in place. I'm sure the financial system will pick it up and the governance will pick it up. So I'm not sure even why we're going through all this vigorous, definitely there's a doubt there in the system or the process. I'm just thinking maybe Director Adams can say something. Thank you.
Director.
So there's there's a difference in the questions that have been asked. The questions that were asked by a member of the public have been responded to in the table that I sent out today. There is no training allowance for elected members. It is an amount that was put in the budget, and the history of it was we had an allocated budget amount. We conducted training for everybody when we had a new council out of that budget. So we paid for basically induction training. When we got to the end of that training, we realised that there was a disparity in the skills and expertise of councillors, as you would expect, because some are trained in different areas. And so we put to council the concept that out of the budget allocation, that each councillor could apply to use an allocation of $3,500 per year to address their own training needs. So it's not provided as an allowance, and that has to be approved by the CEO. That was the resolution of council, I think in February 2016. We have continued along that path. So I think we've probably preempted some of the work that's been done in changing the Act to mandate training for councillors, because we had already made that provision in our budget and encouraged councillors to undertake professional development opportunities for which the city would pay. They have to be relevant to your role as a councillor. We believed that was setting this council up for good governance and was allowing councillors to reach their full potential. I think it's been successful. I think it's worked, and I think people who have needed, who have felt that they needed that additional training to fulfil their role as councillors have taken advantage of it. Those that haven't taken advantage of it may have already had the skills that they felt they needed, or have undertaken training as part of their ongoing roles in other aspects of life. I don't know. But we made that budget available, council agreed to it, and we've stuck by that resolution. There's been some confusion around the inclusion of GST in payments, and that's where some of that, difference of a couple of $100 here and there may have arisen. So I guess that's a long-winded response to what you asked, but that's the history of it.
Councillor.
Thank you, Mr. Thank you, Director Adams, for the explanation. Yes, I mean, it's kind of a reassurance to all of us that there is a preventive controls in place and a process is followed through. So we should be fairly safe, and we are quite happy. Thank you.
Director.
So, with regard to other payments that are mentioned in here, other allowances, they go through a process of checking. You get payment summaries that are done at the end of the year. The governance team maintains control, makes sure the appropriate backup documentation is provided for any claims made by councillors, and make sure that they're compliant with the policies that we have in place. So there are checks and balances in place, there are policies in place, we abide by those policies, we make sure that councillors submitting claims have the appropriate documentation to back them up.
Councillor Margaret Hall.
Thank you, Director. I really appreciate that. Now, I know that when we first started, we had fabulous training. My question is that when Councillor Tarrant did her Institute Directors course, she was also asked to go onto a board. I was asked to go onto the WEBAC board with David Brown at that time, and it was suggested to me to do the Institute Directors course so that while you're on that board, you made sure you had the proper training. Consequent of that, I'm now on two not-for-profit boards, and I have to thank the council for letting me do this.
Councillor Margaret Hall, what's your question?
My question is, I'd like to thank you for my training. Thank you.
That's not a question. Thank you very much, Councillor Margaret Hall. Anyone else? Please, just question. Yes, Councillor Barry, question.
Yes, in relation to, I think, Councillor Kunza's question for the detail of the graphs. On page 103, item 27, it says the city does not expect the legislative changes will require the local government to backdate information it is required to report on. Therefore, the city does not support 1E of the notice of motion, yet we sent everything out today. Was everybody in agreement with that? Or?
Director.
So the comments made in the report are directly in relation to the notice of motion which requested the information to be collated and published on the website. As a result of a question posed by a member of the public, we had to compile that information and send it out anyway. So I guess this report was written before we did all the work in compiling the table that was sent out today. I guess whether we support it or not is now a moot point.
The reason I asked the question is because it's going to be part of the decision-making process for councillors next week, and basically as we've sent all this out now, we've already preempted that decision. And the other question I would ask then is that given that we're not, the processes probably won't happen under 594, where does it say in that what we did today? I mean, I know the public can come in and check the figures, but why did that happen today, and on whose say so?
Director.
So the difference, I guess, in the notice of motion and what we sent out today, so we haven't preempted the decision of council because we haven't published it on the website. The notice of motion requires it to be published on the website. We haven't done that. We are required to provide information with respect to certain things to public who request that information. We do know that previously there have been requests made for similar information, and the Department of Local Government has previously, from want of a better word, directed the local government concerned to provide the information. So given that it's public information anyway, because it's all contained within the warrant listings, all we've done is basically collated it and provided it in response to questions that were asked. So all of this information is publicly available. If somebody wanted to sit through, sit down and go through every single warrant listing and look at every single councillor's payments, then they could come back and potentially ask us questions about what they were for and form a table exactly as we have provided it. So it's public information anyway.
Well, I suggest it'll become more public now. Thank you.
Councillor Margaret Hall.
I do have a question. When we first started in this council, we were able to give you a list. Each councillor would call out to see where they went, what they did, how many functions they went to, and it was in public notice, and everybody knew, the residents knew. However, there were certain councillors who didn't go anywhere and decided that that wasn't a good thing to do. But could we go back to the situation?
Question, please.
My question is, can we go back to putting lists in to show where we've been and what we've done? Thank you.
Mr Mayor, can I just say that that was far too easy to call a point of order on there, so I just ignored it.
That's good.
All right, calm down. Councillor Margaret Hall, you can put a motion in. You so wish. Anyway, Councillor Kunza.
Just following on from Councillor Ponaturo's questions regarding the safeguards in place, can you confirm that there's automatic, when councillors exceed the $7,000 aggregation, that they've been automatically billed?
Director.
To clarify, I was in reference to training allowances.
So the process is that where it has been exceeded, and it's training that has been requested by that councillor under the resolution of council that we're operating under, then the process is that anything in excess of that they will be asked to make the relevant contribution to.
All right, we move on. There's no urgent business this evening, so we now move to confidential matters. I would like to thank members of the public for their attendance and ask that they please leave the council chamber in order for the confidential matters to be discussed. All right. We now move to closure. There's no further business. I now declare the briefing closed at 7:39. And thank everyone for their attendance. Thank you very much.